Welcome to Impact on Ohio, the series where we highlight Ohio leaders from the State House to the U.S. Capitol. We sit down with dedicated public servants to tackle the issues that matter most to Ohio businesses. Brought to you by the Ohio Chamber of Commerce, the state's leading business advocate. We aggressively champion free enterprise, economic competitiveness, and growth for the benefit of all Ohioans. Stay tuned for insightful conversations that will shape the future of Ohio's business landscape. Get ready for Impact on Ohio, where business meets leadership, because Ohio's success is everyone's success. Hi, I'm Steve Stivers, President and CEO of the Ohio Chamber of Commerce. Thanks for joining us for the Impact on Ohio video series, where we interview legislative leaders. Today I'm interviewing Senator Nickie Antonio, who is the Democratic leader of the Senate. Thanks for being with us, Senator.
Well, thanks for inviting me, Steve.
And we're excited to have you on. Can you talk about what initially inspired you to enter public service and pursue a career in politics?
Well, originally, I wanted to see more women in politics, in public office. And so I got involved in a number of campaigns that I helped volunteer, did all the work, ran a couple campaigns at some point. And so that was my contribution, I thought. And then I started doing some advocacy, especially around a skate park in my community that my older daughter really wanted to skateboard. And I was concerned about her safety and that of everybody else's, all of her friends. And so I went to City Council to advocate for the skate park. And what I was greeted with was people who were not really paying attention. I think one guy was actually sleeping. And I got home that day and I was frustrated and I said, I'm tired of explaining things to these people. I could do that job. And I heard myself say, I could do that job. A little while later, the seat opened up on City Council and I ran, I won, and then a seat opened up in at the State House. I ran for that, served 8 years, 4 terms there, and then now I'm in the Senate. But it all started really with civic engagement, wanting to make things better in my own community, and realizing that I actually was the best person for the job.
That's great. And that's a great story of how, at the local level, folks can get involved, move up, and then before you know it, they're the Democratic leader of the Senate. That's a big deal. So you've really made an impact. Can you talk about that impact? What do you consider your most significant legislative accomplishment during your time in the General Assembly, including both the House and Senate?
Yeah, so I thought a lot about this, and frankly, there's been a number of pieces of legislation. I always work in a bipartisan fashion, so we've passed a number of bills, but the one that really stands out is when I was in the House, I worked with then Representative Dorothy Polanda, and she and I introduced a bill to close the loophole on an adoption records law. And there was a companion bill in the Senate, and that was Dave Burke and Bill Beagle, senators over there. And so I was the Democrat working with the Republicans, and we passed the bill out of the House, we got it over to the Senate, and then we hit a snag, and so the 4 of us worked together to move that through. And it was so interesting to me because we all sat in a different place on the circle around how we were touched by adoption. Dorothy had adopted a child. My younger sister had given a child up for adoption when she was very young. Dave Burke was an adopted child. And Bill Beagle had a sister who was adopted. So we all had a different perspective that we brought to it. When we passed the legislation, we were now able, a person who was adopted, and we believe that it affect over 40,000 people in this who were born in the state of Ohio, now have access to an original birth record, either for health purposes, just to have that information. The birth parent is allowed to say they don't want information on their personal information, but the adoptee can still get medical information, which is critically important.
That's great. And I think that speaks to what we've seen, and I've only been at the chamber about 3 years, but my experience with you, Senator, is that you work really well in finding common ground and working on issues where you agree. You know, you don't agree with the chamber on everything, and that's okay. But where you look for issues where we do agree, and you work hard on those issues, and we certainly respect that, because we don't expect anybody to agree with us 100%. It'd be nice, but you know, in the real world, it doesn't happen very often. So I really especially appreciate the way that you've served in office, where you look for common ground and then you work together with people. That's been our experience. So thank you for that. And I think that's a model for a lot of people in this very tumultuous time where people focus on divisive issues too much in our legislature. It's great to see people that want to find common ground and work together.
Well, I appreciate that. And I got some very good advice when I was a brand new legislator to not make things personal, to agree or disagree with my colleagues on the issues, but not be disagreeable to the person standing in front of me and see them as a complete person. And I have worked very hard to do that. And it makes life a lot more enjoyable and successful when it comes to passing legislation.
I appreciate that. You know, as one of my personal heroes is George Washington, and he wrote a whole book on civility. So it's something I've taken to heart as a military officer and when I was in politics and now at the chamber. I think it's really important to make our republic and our state government work well. Civility is really important. So I think you've been a model of that, and I really, really appreciate it. Tell me how your experience as a teacher for children with special needs and then executive director of an outpatient drug and alcohol treatment program has shaped your legislative priorities and the things you work on.
Well, sure. So originally, one of the things I tell people as far as working, I worked with teenagers. They were my favorite group to work with. Troubled youth. They had all kinds of behavioral issues as well as they had some learning difficulties. And I tell people that very much prepared me to work in the legislature. I learned a lot from troubled youth because you have to have a sense of humor, never show fear, and really, really like people and try to find that one thing, that kernel of commonality that then you can start from there and then have some success working together. It worked with my troubled youth, and apparently it works in the legislature as well. As far as running the outpatient treatment program, I had no idea when I came to the legislature that 2 years in, we would be dealing with the opioid crisis. And so I value so much the experience that I brought with me working with women in the city of Cleveland who are struggling with addiction, trying to find a path to treatment, really working on both strategies and also working to educate my colleagues on the fact that many people came with preconceived ideas about, especially addiction. They really thought it was a moral failing of some sort of character. And we would talk, and I felt really good about the shift that took place. We had people come in, families came in and talked about struggling with addiction and what it meant to their family, to their neighborhoods, to their communities. And I watched my legislative colleagues shift in their attitude about addiction and the fact that they now understood, after getting all this information, that first of all, it's a disease and that it is treatable and that people do recover. It was amazing to be there and see that happen and be a part of that. We worked very well, Representative Smith, Representative Driehaus, Robert Sprague, and we had this foursome where we worked on all kinds of pieces of legislation, moving things forward to really address all the different parts of opioid crisis in the state of Ohio. I feel so good about that, and I learned so much, but I had no idea that my experience with the treatment center would be so valuable when I came to the legislature.
Certainly you were here with your background, it was very fortunate that you were here at that time to have somebody with experience in treatment and recovery. You know, it's something we've gotten involved in the chamber. Yes. We created the opioid toolkit for employers. It's the most downloaded thing from our website ever. Over 120,000 downloads of the opioid toolkit. And we hope that all those employers are using those best practices to help their employees and their families. And we think they are. And in fact, we are refreshing that right now. It's unfortunately, the drug crisis isn't just an opioid crisis anymore. It's expanded out to other things now. And we still have some issues in Ohio, but we've made so much progress. And I think that's something that you've got to be proud of.
Yes, yes, thank you. And, you know, as we worked on it, one of the interesting things that happened, we had passed a bill to make pharmacists able to give vaccinations as we were working on all these things. When COVID hit, they made the announcement that the vaccines would be available at your local pharmacy. And so Ryan Smith and I were texting each other saying, we did that. We made that possible. And you don't often get these opportunities.
If we couldn't go to our local pharmacy and how crowded those, I don't know if you remember all the way back to 2020, those mass vaccination sites, they did it at Ohio Stadium. And I think it was the Schottenstein Center. They did these big vaccination centers. That's all we would have had if it wasn't for your bill that allowed those. Most of us got them at our local pharmacy, but then we still had those big mass vaccination sites. But local pharmacies were certainly very convenient.
So that's the other thing about legislative process, I think, is you know what issues and problems you're dealing with today, but you have no idea how that might be used for good in the future.
Yeah. Well, let's look forward to the future. So, you know, we're winding down. We have 6 months left on a General Assembly, but I think I saw there's only 4 or 5 session days left. So basically this legislative session's winding down. Do you have any priorities in the final days of this session? And what are you looking forward to in the next General Assembly?
So one of the things is that I'm looking forward to is I'm hoping that we are able to pass an end to the death penalty in this legislative session. We have been working on this. I've been working on this since it came to the legislature in 2011. We have the most bipartisan, bicameral group of legislators, so in the House and the Senate, dedicated to trying to end the use of the death penalty. We've talked to people about all the different reasons, whether it's an economic reason, a moral reason, which I hope people agree on that, and the fact that it's used disproportionately affects people of color. It depends on what county you live in. Justice Pfeiffer called it a death lottery at some point. But here's the most interesting thing to me of recent, as I've been working on this. We heard from a group of international folks, leaders, about 2 years ago who came to Ohio. I met with them and they said, we're watching what's happening in Ohio. We would like to do business with states that are not using the death penalty anymore. And so we're watching what you're doing in Ohio. Now, I had never thought of it as also being economic advancement for our state or creating opportunity for other business collaborations, but suddenly that was in front of us. There's a group that's going to be visiting later this year to talk with some legislators. I think I'm going to have them maybe come and talk to you as well.
Sure. Love to hear from them.
But it's so, I thought it was so fascinating. And look, the other piece of legislation we continue to work on is the Fairness Act, fairness for LGBTQ folks in employment and housing and in the public community. And the thing about that is also at the court. It's the right thing to do, but it's also economically the smart thing to do as we're trying to recruit people from all over the country to come and work here. We want workers. We want people who want to be in Ohio, who want to put down roots, raise their families here. Most young people want to see and want to live in a state and in communities that are welcoming to all people. And so we'll continue to work on that. I think that there's a lot of opportunity going forward this next year for us to continue to advance those kinds of opportunities where we get to increase workforce. The other thing that I've worked on that is really important to me to continue to work on next year is we've worked with women business owners trying to advance their opportunities. And I know that we passed something to get an evaluation of where things are at right now, to get a baseline. So we'll continue working with them because I think it's also would benefit us in the state if more women business owners were able to advance and prosper.
Sure. Those are great, interesting conversations to have for the next General Assembly. Do you have anything that you're really close on that you think you might get done in those last few sessions that will be fast and furious in November and December in lame duck? Or I know a lot of things this has not been the most productive General Assembly term. Is there anything that you're close on that you think you might get done at the end of this General Assembly?
I gotta say that I think we're kind of watching everything as it comes forward right now. Bill Blessing and I have a bill that's dealing with property rights and the ability to sort of block some of these companies that have come in massively, picked up all kinds of properties through LLCs, but we can't identify them. I would love to see that pass. I don't know if we'll be able to do that by the end of the year. I think right now we're still kind of watching to see where all things are. I also have a bill with Senator Manning on air tags to be able to make sure that somebody doesn't use an air tag without your knowledge of it, that they're not tracking you. So this is part of, as technology advances, things come up that we never thought of. And so we heard from a woman, and since then we've heard from other people who have actually been tracked
with an
air tag. They're so tiny, they're this big. They could slip in a purse or anything.
If there's an air tag traveling with me now, is that new? I noticed that recently where there's an air tag with you, so at least it lets you know that you might maybe be being tracked. That's a great notification that is around. And I think I was with somebody else and they had an air tag, and so my phone told me there's an air tag traveling with you. You should know that. So it's the good news is, I'm not sure technology did that a year ago where it told you that was traveling with you, but that you also, it certainly might be a need for policy that you're working on too. So interesting stuff. Well, talk a little bit about the strategies you've used. We talked about your bipartisan sort of efforts and your civility, but what kind of strategies have you used as you tried to forge bipartisan legislation in the General Assembly?
Well, if you ask President Huffman, he would tell you karaoke every once in a while. And there was a group of us that participated in karaoke. It was very bipartisan. A number of years ago, we keep saying we got to get the band back together. So, but it's that having fun, going out to dinner, having coffee, breakfast. I have visited members in their offices. Kirk Schuring and I, every once in a while, would have breakfast together. I'd bring the coffee and come in and sit in his awesome office, he had some kind of, 40s music playing, and it was like the best thing ever. To get to know each other as real people, beyond partisan divide, beyond a specific, only looking at somebody through the lens of a specific issue, knowing something about them, their family. I just think that makes a world of difference. And it has been, I think, the thing that, has really made it possible to then work together. Yeah. You work with people that you like, right?
Having a real relationship matters. Yeah, that's great. I think we have one last question. So you're on the Health Committee and the Transportation Committee. In those specific areas, do you have any priorities of legislation you're working on now or in the next General Assembly?
Well, speaking of transportation and technology, one of the things that I think we touched on it a little bit this past General Assembly, but I think next time, we're really going to have to look at, is there an alternative to our gas tax? with more electric vehicles, with hybrids, we don't know what's coming down the pike. We need to find an alternative to just taxing gasoline. And so there's been the, miles traveled. We're looking at that. I think we need to continue to look at that, vehicle miles traveled, and come and make some shifts and make some changes. So I think that's something we'll be looking at for sure. I think we've done a great job, especially with the infrastructure dollars that came to us from the federal government, to be able to dedicate them to the places that needed it the most, which was wonderful, because not only does it make our roads more pleasant to travel, it makes them safe. I also think we need to look at continuing safety aspects for pedestrians. More people are walking, riding bikes. That's the good news. The bad news is pedestrian deaths are up. And so we really need to keep tracking how to make our roads safer. And as far as health policy goes, I think we continue to try to find strategies to bring down our infant mortality rates. I mean,
it's really in just a few zip codes.
Yeah.
Sadly, it's where we have the highest poverty. Infant mortality is strikingly increased. It's really sad. It speaks to some need for all of us to engage to create real equality of opportunity.
And access to health care that goes across the board, because while that is absolutely true for infant mortality, when we look at the numbers for maternal mortality, it crosses zip code, economic level, it crosses everything. And so that tells us that there's some barriers in the way of women of color being able to access the best health care they need at the one of the most important times in their lives, when they're pregnant or postpartum. Mm-hmm. And so I just think we need to continue to work on what are the best practices. Are there states, we keep looking around at, are there other states doing some things? Are there things we know that we just need to invest in? But I think we need to keep looking at strategies.
Well, thanks, Senator, for being with us on Impact on Ohio. You're making an impact on Ohio, and we appreciate you coming in and sharing your thoughts and ideas, and we look forward to working with you in the future. Thanks, you. Senator.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. If you have an idea for the Impact on Ohio video series, email us anytime. You can also scan the QR code to take you directly to the YouTube page and watch Impact on Ohio.